the awareness that, you know what, we got away with one last week. We made it closer than we needed to be. We've got things to work on. You've heard that from Brandon Graham.
Welcome to Pond Lee Hockey. We've helped over 100,000 injured and disabled workers obtain benefits, as well as some of the biggest settlements in the state. If you've been injured at work, give Pond Lee Hockey a call.
Welcome into the JAKIB Media pregame show presented by Ocean Casino Resort. We're coming to you live from the Gallery Bar Book and Games. I'm Devin Caney, joined by Mark Farzetta, Derek Gunn, and Seth Joyner. We've got a big Monday Night Football matchup coming up. Vikings-Eagles starts in about 2 hours. Eagles coming off that 38-35 victory over Detroit. Vikings coming off of their victory over Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Consensus throughout this week has been kind of mixed heading into this game. So, Mark and everyone, I want to know your thoughts on your confidence level in the Eagles getting a win tonight, because mine is a little low. I'm not going to lie, Mark.
Well, I mean, the Eagles, I think we can all agree, are not that team that just shows up and wins. Hopefully, at least not yet in the season. There's a little bit of humility here. And after you have that close a game, after being up so much against the Lions, obviously you have some humility. But I am confident that the Eagles will win this game. I am confident that the Eagles are a better team than what will be before them tonight in their home opener in the Minnesota Vikings. And I think that if you're going to talk about a guy like Justin Jefferson, as I know we will for the vast majority of the show tonight, for a lot of the show tonight, well, then you better have guys like James Bradbury and Darius Slay on the defensive side of the football to help you out. But yes, to answer your question, I am confident in an Eagles victory tonight.
Did you know that the Eagles could have drafted Justin Jefferson?
I have. I heard that once or twice as well this week, believe it or not.
Derek, how are you feeling?
I am confident that I don't know what to expect tonight based on what we saw across the league yesterday. Everywhere I've gone today, and even on our show, Sports Take with Rob Ellis, Barrett Brooks, and myself earlier today, that's all people want to talk about. What do you think tonight? But when you look at the way the Dolphins game, the Jets game, the Cardinals game all ended yesterday, and that's just a sample of what went on yesterday. Unpredictability is, I guess, the topic of discussion for this game tonight. You have two evenly matched teams, two explosive offenses, a quarterback who's been around the block a few times, and Kirk Cousins, who can rack up yards on the drop of a hat. Jalen Hurts obviously has improved a lot compared to what we saw of Jalen Hurts just a season ago. Two great running backs in Miles Sanders and Dalvin Cook. I honestly don't know what's going to happen tonight, because we need to see Hassan Reddick get off in this game. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on, how I think he would be best utilized. But they got a guy in Minnesota named Zadarius Smith. They're going to move him all over the place. He's like 6'4", 272. They're going to move him all over the place to find the advantage for them. And he is the one guy in their defense you have to account for every single play. So I know it's going to be a good game, an entertaining game, a game of big plays, big misses. But in terms of asking me a prediction for this game, I can't give you one.
Seth, can you give a prediction for this game?
I will before the show is over, that's for certain.
Okay, not score-wise. But
well,
Deegan says he can't predict it, so I want to know your thoughts.
I think the phrase for this week is self-awareness. And this is a football team, if you listen to the press conferences all week long, you understand that there's this level of self-awareness. The awareness that, you know what, we got away with one last week. We made it closer than we needed to be. We've got things to work on. You heard that from Brandon Graham. You heard that from Jason Kelsey. You heard from Lane Johnson in postgame last week that, hey, we had some protection issues. Basically, we didn't know where they were coming from, so we couldn't pick them up. So that forced Jalen Hurts to vacate the pocket more than he had to. That's been a large topic of conversation all week long. If this team didn't talk in those terms, then I'd be a little more worried than I am right now. I think they know that, listen, they've got a wide receiver that's, one of the top wide receivers in the game that they've got to get under control. They've got a running back that they're going to face this purpose, and that if they don't get him under control and they don't shut down the running game, that it's going to be a long night. And they know that they have a quarterback also who's been much maligned, but a guy that, when given time, he can hurt you in a myriad of ways. He will cut you to shreds if you don't get pressure on him. But they also know from past experience that he's the type of quarterback that if you can make him feel uncomfortable in the pocket, he'll fumble some, he'll throw you some, he'll make some bad mistakes. He gets real skittish in the pocket. So, listen, we got a lot of show to talk about, what tonight's going to be like. But I think this team is self-aware enough, and there's enough veterans on this team that will pull the young guys along to understand, hey, yeah, we won last week, but let's not be happy with how we won, because sometimes how you win is as important moving forward as if you win.
Well, we can't talk about Justin Jefferson and stopping the Vikings offense without talking about Jonathan Gannon and the defense, especially the defensive performance against the Lions last week. Yes, they allowed them to put up 35 points, but I think yesterday, Deegan, you brought up a good point, kind of changed my opinion on Jonathan Gannon and how this Eagles defense performed, because we saw the Lions then play pretty well. So I think we're thinking of Detroit as this team that they were last year and in seasons past. Did that kind of make you feel a little better about Jonathan Gannon and his game plan going into tonight's game?
No, not at this particular time.
Okay.
No. I'm still in a wait and see mode when it comes to Jonathan Gannon. I want to see how he changes things up tonight. The only sack this team got last week was an accidental sack from a bad snap. When you look at the multitude of snaps that occurred across the league just this past weekend, I'm still concerned about how is he going to get pressure on the quarterback. You can't rely on a four-man front the entire game. You've got to send the hound somewhere. He did it for 3 consecutive series a week ago, and then he backed down and let Detroit back in the game. You got to bring the hounds, I think, for the whole game, just to keep Kirk Cousins thinking, where's it coming from next? If you don't, like Seth said, Kirk Cousins will stand back there. You thought Jared Goff got in a rhythm in the second half? Watch Kirk Cousins throwing Adam Thielen, and that got him Justin Jefferson, who I hate mentioning his name, but he is one of the premier receivers in the game.
Seth, what are your thoughts on the defensive performance? Sorry, Mark, I'll get to you next. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Well, listen, I think that it's in Jonathan Gannon's DNA to not be aggressive. I think that the way the game played itself out early, it lent itself to him having to be a little more aggressive, to putting an extra guy in the box to try to get the run under control, even though they didn't fit correctly and it didn't work, especially, early in the game. But his DNA is to, rush 4, rush 5, and hopefully they get there. The problem is you've got to be self-aware enough as a coach to realize that, we're not getting there, and I've got to do something different. Now, the problem with that is it takes creativity. I'm watching games all day yesterday. It was so awesome to just sit back on a Sunday and be able to watch all the games and evaluate what's going on. And you saw teams bring pressure. I mean, show pressure from one side and drop out and bring pressure from the other side. Once the offense has already set its protections, that kind of creativity is what we thought we were going to get when we got Jonathan Gannon here. And I've yet to see it. I didn't see it at all last year, which, had me just bursting at the seams. And it really ticked me off last week, to D. Gunn's point, early in the game, they brought some blitzes, but then they backed off. And we saw yesterday, and a myriad of teams came back from behind. The Cardinals came back. The Dolphins came back. There's one other team. The Jets came back. That's proof positive that in this league, the game isn't over until it's over. And people can talk about rubbing people's nose in it if you want to, but the Kansas City Chiefs don't give a damn. What the Kansas City Chiefs is going to do, they're trying to score every single possession until there's an insurmountable amount of time left on the clock for a team to come back. So there's never a time, defensively or offensively, for you to say, okay, we're calling the dogs off until we get to 2 minutes in the game, okay, and there's no way, no chance whatsoever that a team has to come back. That's what I want to see. I want to see the killer instinct on both sides of the football.
Yeah, don't let up. At any point in this game, they cannot let up. Like I said, they're not a team that can just show up and win. And I think we all know that at this point. But when it comes to a guy like Jonathan Gannon, there were 2 things he said at this press conference that made me feel one made me feel a little bit better. The other, not so much. The one thing that made me feel better about Jonathan Gannon was the idea of not being satisfied. Yes, we won the game. And it brought me back to Jason Kelce, what he said before the season. It's one thing to win, and then sometimes the mistakes, they get covered up because you still won. No mistakes were covered up in this game, even a little bit. They were out there. And for Jonathan Gannon to at least acknowledge that, I think is a good thing. The bad thing that came out of it was, well, we were expecting them to run the football more at the end of the game, but they didn't do that. Oh, so you got out-coached is what happened at the end of that Detroit Lions game.
They were down, and he expected for them to run the ball.
Yeah, how novel. Yeah. But
I told you.
That's real comforting.
Exactly.
Lack of self-awareness.
Lack of self-awareness, and that's what they got. That's what was exploited on them last week. Well, now you got a guy like Dalvin Cook that has the ability to do that, and you got 2 deep threats with a guy like Adam Thielen, and let's say it again, Justin Jefferson. So let's see them not take the foot off the gas this time around.
The best thing that happened for the Eagles last week is that they played Detroit in week 1 and not week 2.
Right.
Because after what I saw Detroit do yesterday was even more impressive than what they did against the Eagles. So they're finding their rhythm now. And Washington didn't know what hit them. You know, Kirk Cousins didn't know if he was foot or horseback most of that game. And I'm telling you, you know, they got lucky. You know, and most important thing is I don't care how you get the W. And they got the W. But, man, you better see you've had 8 days now to stew on this, to work on this, to improve this. I better see a much better performance from their defense tonight.
Now, aside from the pass rush, Justin Jefferson, going to say his name a million times
We
tonight.
should have done a charity donation.
Don't say it.
Right?
Don't say it.
We said
$1
the same thing.
every time we say it. So I assume Darius Slay is going to be on Justin Jefferson for the most part. How do we feel? I know we talk about the pass rush, getting to the quarterback more. How do we feel about the Eagles secondary and how they stack up to Justin Jefferson?
Well, listen, a lot depends on the type of coverage that they're going to play.
Right.
And sometimes when you send a guy traveling with a wide receiver, because the knock on Justin Jefferson was the fact that he could not play in the slot because he only played in the slot his senior year. That was a fallacy because if you did the research, you could have saw how much he played outside, and they asked him to move inside because of Jamar Chase. But now he's a guy that can move all over the place. Yep. And when you start to travel a wide receiver, a cornerback with a wide receiver, sometimes that tips coverage. You know, if you're in man and he's traveling with him wherever he goes, then that pretty much means that, you know, hey, I got man across the board. And even if they take him away, where's the next guy I'm going to? I'm going my best matchup, Thielen against, you know, Bradbury. So you gotta be careful about where you pick and choose. Now, if it's an obvious situation where you're blitzing and you're not hiding it, then you know there's no problem having him follow him. But you're gonna have to designate how you run your coverages when you start traveling corners with people from side to side, because he's gonna line up at X, he's gonna line up at Z, and he's gonna line up in the slot. They line him up all over the place.
You know what's so crazy about last week's game? Bradbury, you just reminded me, got a pick 6, and the defense performed so poorly that we're not even talking about it. Like, I don't know, like, how that's just kind of being skipped over. But, Mark, when it comes to the secondary, I know you're a big defense guy. We talked about it all last season.
Sure.
What is the one aspect that if the Eagles improved or focused on anything heading into this game, what would that be?
Well, it's the fact that you can't have a sack, and I like the way D. Gunn expressed it a second ago, described it as saying that it was an accidental sack, because that's exactly what it was. Look, we've, for a lot of years now in Philadelphia, even with Jim Schwartz as the defensive coordinator, we've talked about not being aggressive, not sending blitzes, not sending the extra man, whatever it might be. But at least Jim Schwartz had a wide 9 to fall back on where you were still trying to get after the quarterback. Was it as creative? No, not even a little bit. But a guy like Jonathan Gannon has to find a way to be aggressive with the guys that this front office has provided him with, whether that be Jordan Davis on the field more, whether that be Nakobe Dean running up the middle a little bit more like they did at Georgia, or whether that be sending a corner. For the first 3 quarters of that game against the Lions, I was like, this is a whole new, it's Jonathan Gannon guy figured out how, you must have been listening to Seth Joyner, be a little bit more aggressive. And then in that fourth quarter, that's where the wheels came off. They can't take their foot off the gas. They can't allow 21 points in the second half like they did last week against an inferior offense.
Well, how much of those 14 points come down to conditioning? Because I've heard that a lot throughout this week, especially when it comes to Jordan Davis not playing that many snaps. You know, was the defense just gassed? Was it not so much coaching and more just they were out of shape?
If that's the case, then that's on the coaching staff, that's on the organization, because their mandate was that, you know, we're going to protect players, we're going to rest players, we're going to minimize the workload so we can get them to the regular season and make sure that they're healthy. Well, you know, I can't ever remember in my time of training, you know, walking off the field without some conditioning being done. You know, if you're going to play 60 minutes, and even though most of these players only play 55 to 60 minutes, you know, you got to be conditioned for that game. You got to put in the work so that, you know, when the rubber meets the road in the fourth quarter, when you really need your top players on the field, that those guys are fresh and they're ready and they're conditioned to play. It blows my mind that, you know, conditioning flies in the face of staying healthy, because for all the, let's try to stay healthy. If you go back and you look at last week and you look at all the injuries, I mean, they lose Derek Barnett for the rest of the year. And look around the league at how many guys got injured and how many guys they lost for the rest of the season. that tells me the injuries can happen anytime, anywhere. So if a guy's, what's the difference between a guy getting injured in preseason or getting injured in training camp or getting injured week 1 in the first quarter? It doesn't matter. Injuries are occupational hazard. They're going to happen. And I would err on the side of, if we practice hard and we train hard and we condition, then we're less likely to get injured. Because when do you see most players get hurt? They get hurt when they get tired. They get tired, they go on half speed. They go on half speed, that's when they get themselves in trouble, and they get hurt when they're not paying attention.
All right, guys, much more football to talk about after the break, so stick around. We'll be back after a few minutes.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.